I just want to spend some time and talk about the Bitcoin mining scene because we haven't talked about that in quite a bit. So I'm an investor in Bitfarms. I got a custom Bitfarms shirt that I am wearing today in honor of this segment. Bitfarms just released their Q3 numbers, their earnings. And let me just go through some of the highlights, and then maybe we can talk about it. And by the way, there was also another interview that just came out with Ben Gagnon, the CEO of Bitfarms. So I took some notes, and then maybe we can quickly go through that. It's like an hour-long interview, and there's a lot of notes. So maybe I'll skim that part a little, but let's go through the Q3 Bitfarms earnings for a bit. So let's go through the October highlights actually. So October on November 1st, they posted the October highlights, and at that time, as of October 31st, as of Halloween, they reached 11.5 exahash per second, and they reached 10.6 exahash average operational. So I guess they have some machines installed, but they haven't turned everything on yet for whatever reason. So I think that's maybe some people would say that that's a little bit of a concern, but it's relatively close, right? 11.5 versus 10. And I think that actually went up a bit if you look at their earnings report, which came out I think 2 weeks after this report. But anyways, Bitcoin average mined was 22.2 Bitcoin per exahash, which was up 5% month over month. But it has gone down a lot year over year. It's like, it's down 67% year over year. But remember, we have the halving, right? That's the main cause of that. Now they earned 236 Bitcoin in October, which is up 9% from the month before, which is nice. And their average Bitcoin earnings per day is 7.6. So that's pretty much the October update. Now for their earnings, you know how I mentioned earlier that it was at 10.6 average operational and 11.5 fully operational. Well, they actually upped that to 11.9 as of I think this came out November 12th. So just a couple of days ago. So yeah, they're pretty much getting to 12 now, although, people are saying that they're probably going to miss their 21 exahash goal by the end of the year, which is unfortunate, but maybe we'll talk about that later. But that's kind of where things stand. Their efficiency is really nice though. So they got their efficiency to 21 watts per terahash. And it's the amount of watts per terahash, right? So you want that number to be low, like lower is better because they're using less energy per terahash. So I think they started the year at like 30 something, right? 35, I think it was. So the fact that they got it to 21 is a pretty big improvement from the start of the year, which is nice. So they also did increase their HODL. So they have just 1,100-ish BTC HODLing. And then they also have their synthetic HODL. So if you guys don't remember what that is, that's long-dated call options, which if they're buying call options, it costs less than buying the Bitcoin itself. So it frees up more capital. So this is something that Bitfarms has been doing for a while. And they have also increased their long-dated call option synthetic HODL strategy. So those are kind of the main highlights of their Q3 earnings report. And yeah, I mean, revenue 45 million, it's up 8%. I'm not like so much worried about the revenue because so much of it is dependent on the Bitcoin price itself, and it's kind of beyond their control to a large extent. Yeah, I'm not going to get too caught up on that, but it is up 8% quarter over quarter or 30% year over year if you care about that. Now, let me quickly go through some of the notes for the Ben Gagnon interview. So, yeah, basically, he talked about the 2.7 cents per terahash per day achieved, which is down from 3 cents per terahash per day previously. So it's a little, and that's again has to do with the 21 watt per terahash efficiency improvement. And yes, it is down from 35 at the beginning of the year. So yeah, its lower number is better. And he talked about the energy costs in Argentina. So one of the interviewers, I think it was Anthony, that brought up the idea that they're increasing a lot of their operations in Paraguay, but not in Argentina. And I think Ben Gagnon's answer to that was that Argentina recently they raised their energy costs a little bit, and also he mentioned something about Malay being like sort of the Trump of South America, I guess you could say. He's like a little bit more libertarian, but less like predictable. So he's just kind of Ben Gagnon is a little bit hesitant about expanding Argentina while there's a lot of legislative changes. So that's why he's going big on Paraguay instead, which there was a electro dam that was just built, so he can plug directly into that, and that provides a lot of cheap renewable energy. So there's that. And then regarding the S21 Pros, so Ben was saying that how previously he relied a lot on the previous generation T21 machines, which are Bitcoin miners designed by this company called Bitmain, but they had a batch of about 2,700 out of they bought a total of 83,000. So it was only a small portion of it, but there was about 2,700 out of those 83,000 that they bought that were a bad batch that just didn't work and they overheated or something. And basically they were hashing at zero. So they had to, get it warranty and get them replaced. And, it just led to a delay, right? And I think this is part of the reason why they're going to probably miss their 21 exahash per second goal by the end of the year, is because they had to, replace a lot of these machines. So Ben decided it was time to get some S21 Pros, which are faster and more efficient. They're a newer generation machines to kind of, fill in the gap that the broken T21s left. So that was kind of a strategic decision that maybe he wasn't planning on making before, but now Bitfarms, they want to keep their options open. So they're diversifying their fleet into the S21 Pros. And regarding the Stronghold agreement, this was another thing that people really hammered on. It's like, why is he entering into a hosting agreement and placing Bitcoin mining machines at Stronghold's facility? And basically, Ben's answer to this was, look, like the portfolio has changed, right? So he's managing a portfolio of different sites, whereas before the Stronghold deal was announced, before that was a thing, that wasn't an option to deploy any miners at the Stronghold site. But the difference between, let's say, like the Stronghold site, which is in Pennsylvania, compared to some of the other sites in, let's say, Paraguay, is that Paraguay has like more of a steady stream of cheap energy at a fixed cost. So the idea is that you'd want to put your most high efficiency, high performance miners in the Paraguay site, whereas the Pennsylvania site, the Stronghold site, maybe there's more flexibility and there's more optimization they can do with powering down and powering up miners depending on the price change of electricity changing. So that's kind of where his mind is at, where you put the machines, maybe some older machines and some machines that are able to be more efficient at winding up and winding down very quickly. You would want to put those in the Stronghold sites in Pennsylvania, and then put the high efficiency miners that could just crank all day in Paraguay. So that's kind of the decision that he had to make. And he's just trying to optimize the different sites. And yeah, that's why he decided to enter into that Stronghold agreement. And again, I believe that he said that was going to contribute 4.4 exahash additional to Bitfarms once everything is up and running. And that should be up and running by Q1 of 2025 at the latest is the target. And lastly, regarding HPC, um, they did uh, they did launch two HPC pilot projects, one in their Washington site and one in Pennsylvania. So HPC stands for high performance computing. It's the AI data center type of stuff, and people were kind of bashing on Bitfarms before because they didn't have any HPC plans or HPC plays. And we've seen companies that do have HPC plays like Iron and Hut 8. They've gone up a lot more than Bitfarms in percentage wise, relatively speaking. Ben's saying that he's not opposed to it and he's willing to contribute a little bit of hash rate, a little bit of power, not hash rate, but a little bit of megawatt hours to kind of throw a pilot project and see where it goes. And the reason why he did two, one on Washington State, not Washington DC, but Washington State is on the West Coast, right? So he's saying that these customers of HPC, they really care about where the data center is located. So maybe there's more demand on the West Coast, or maybe there's more demand on the East Coast. So he doesn't really know. So he launched one on the East Coast, or near the East Coast. It's in Pennsylvania, and then there's one in Washington, and see where it goes from there, right? But he's still. I'm getting the sense, right? I'm saying this. He didn't say this like explicitly, but I'm getting the sense that Ben Gagnon he's kind of still very hesitant on the HPC stuff because he says it's very capital intensive, right? It could be up to 30 to 40 times more capital required to spin up an operation compared to a Bitcoin mining operation, because there's just so much, more stuff involved, right? And these days, the GPU requirements and all that stuff needed for high performance computing, it's a lot more expensive than Bitcoin miners, right? So you got to keep that in mind. But basically, that was kind of the main points of the interview. Oh, actually, one last thing. He did mention, because Bitfarms is a Canadian company, right? And he didn't mention that somebody, like the one of the hosts, I think it was also Anthony, that asked him, "Oh, why are you not expanding in Canada as well?" Because he's asked about why are you not expanding in Argentina, and he said it was legislative changes and stuff. And his answer for Canada was actually very similar. He said that the Trudeau government is very hostile to Bitcoin mining, and that he's not willing to even explore expanding in Canada until there's a change in the administration. He literally said those words. He wants a change in the administration before he's willing to commit more capital. So if you ever needed another reason why we need an election here in Canada, well, there you have it. And then I think it was like when he said that, Bryce McNally, who's one of the other hosts on the interview, he kind of smiled a bit and he like nodded his head. It's like, yeah, we really need a change in administration. So I think it is a biased crowd, right? Because Bitcoiners are mostly against Trudeau, but I think this is a sentiment that's shared in Canada by a lot of people now. So we'll have to see where it goes. But we're not here to talk about politics just yet. Maybe in another story later tonight. But for this story, for the Bitfarm story, I wanted to get what you guys' thoughts are on everything that I've just said. Everything from their Q3 earnings to their October update to this interview that just happened. And if you don't want to talk about Bitfarms specifically, you can also throw in some of your thoughts on the last few days of just the entire Bitcoin mining market, because it's been quite the wild ride, right? The markets open up big green on Monday, and then Bitcoin kind of kept on going up slowly, and then the miners just dropped like a rock and basically erased all the gains that we made on Monday by now. So what's going on there, and is Bitcoin mining dead? And what are your thoughts on Bitfarms, and what are your thoughts on just the entire market, the entire industry as a whole? So I don't know who wants to take it away first, but feel free.
I think Bitfarms is in kind of a weird spot because they said they were going to hit 21, and they basically admitted to it now that they aren't going to be able to meet that exahash goal by the timeline that they'd originally said. And they've got lots of valid reasons for it. But for me, it's kind of like, okay, maybe you should have hedged your bets a little more when you were making the announcement that you were going to hit 21. Maybe you should have said, we're going to hit 18. And then, if you hit 21, great. But now I feel like we were kind of expecting 21, and now we're feeling a little bit let down, right? So I think that is something from a marketing perspective that they definitely made a mistake there. And I think part of that might be that they were looking at other miners who were doing their build outs, who were saying big numbers and seeing all this additional coverage and stuff for them, and they thought, oh, we'll do something similar and have a good time. But they kind of went a little bit too I think they went a little bit too hard in terms of their expectations, and now they and we are paying the price on their overestimation of how they're going to do, because and to be clear, I am a shareholder of Bitfarms, so that is just to disclose that. But we're looking at a share price that hasn't moved a whole ton to the upside in at this time last year. I'm pretty sure we were almost at the same price. Like I remember December last year we hit 450 or so Canadian dollars, and we're still currently at $3 Canadian. So this is not a particularly high gain scenario. It's not like iron or any of the other ones where iron was 3 something this time last year, and now it's $10, and people are still going, oh, that's pretty cheap. So I think that Bitfarms is currently representing an undervalued company, but I think that they've kind of put themselves in a position to be undervalued because of them over what's the word? Overmating and under delivering is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, no, but sorry to interrupt. Just to maybe defend Bitfarms a little, and I am wearing the Bitfarms T-shirt, but I am not being paid by Ben to say this. In fact, I'm paying him because I'm a shareholder, and But yeah, anyways, just to defend Bitfarms a little, I just think if you compare them to other Bitcoin mining companies, right? Take Hive, for example. And by the way, I actually also have Hive shares. So I'm not trying to bash Hive, but Hive has not announced major hash rate expansion. And yet Hive stock has been doing better than Bitfarms. So it's like, which one is worse, right? Like, I understand what you're saying, that Bitfarms overpromised and it seems like they're going to underdeliver. But at least, even if they promise 21 exahash, if they deliver 17 or 18, yes, they under delivered, but they went from, what is it, like 5 point something exahash to 18, let's just say they get to by the end of the year. That's still like a massive hash rate expansion, right? Versus Hive, they didn't promise anything, so I guess they're not like going back on their promise because they didn't promise anything, but they're not growing their hash rate either, and yet their stock is being seemingly more rewarded by the market. So I just think that's a little unfair, right? But yeah, what do you think, Tristan?
Yeah, so I've got some counterpoints on that one. So Hive, for example, they have a significant Bitcoin hodl compared to their market cap. I think that is a large degree the reason why they've been performing better than Bitfarms. If you compare them to a company like Hut 8, which is basically the only thing going for it from a Bitcoin perspective is their hodl size. Hut 8 has also been outperforming what we would have expected it to do, given that their performance as a Bitcoin miner is frankly pathetic and terrible. So maybe that's a little bit aggressive, but I haven't been particularly impressed with their mining for a long time. But And then with regards to Hive, we also have to remember that um, Hive has announced some additional growth, but it's in 2025 for my recollection. But Hive is it was in a different scenario than Bitfarms because Hive was undervalued as well prior to like more recent times where it's outperformed Bitfarms. But prior to that, Hive was also equally undervalued. So it's not, or even perhaps even more so undervalued. Like realistically, Hive was being valued at their HODL and basically like I think it was a HODL and like 60% additional, and it's like Bitfarms was being valued at so like HODL like Hive was at like 200 million for HODL size and then like 300 million for their mining operations, and Bitfarms is being valued at 1.2 billion with a HODL of under 100 million and mining capacity that was not 4 times bigger than Hive, right? Because Hive still even at current times they have 6 exahash, which you times that by 4, that's 24 exahash. Bitfarms isn't at 24. So I know it's not directly comparable, but I'm just saying that it's I think Bitfarms is definitely underperforming where it should be, and I think part of that is the sentiment. And I think a big issue on that front is the Iron question, because we had Iron and Bitfarms both announce very close together their aggressive growth plans. Well, Bitfarms has come up with all these issues and not hit lots of targets. And, we're heading towards the end and they're going, we're not going to be able to make it for a 6 to 30 exahash. Whereas Iron, which was doing pretty much the same, except they were going to 30 exahash, is basically on track, to my knowledge, to hit that. They've already crossed the 2022 mark. So they've already put in basically as many machines as Bitfarms would have needed to put in. So it's really hard when you're sitting here and you're comparing Bitfarms and Iron and you're going, why would I want to be in Bitfarms when they can't deliver when I could be in Iron who can deliver? And I think that's a big contributing factor to them kind of being undervalued, because there's so many options that are out there that are more that have been showing that they can deliver again and again and again. Well, Bitfarms has got all this FUD and such from the whole riot question mark. They also had a CEO change with a whole lawsuit for the former CEO. So they've had a lot of FUD just kicking around that other companies just haven't had. Like the worst Iron had was a short report roasting their HPC business, which represents like 1% of their annual revenue. So it's like picking on Amazon for their retail stores. It's like, who cares? Who cares if the retail stores kind of suck? Like no one's buying Amazon stocks for those like Amazon Fresh stores, right? So I think that they're in a bit of a spot where they're in an industry where there's a lot of other options, and they have not been able to make themselves particularly appealing compared to the other options as of currently. So that being said, am I considering, changing my position on them? Not really. I think that they have been underperforming. My expectation is that when money starts flowing into these Bitcoin miners, it's going to flow pretty aggressively to all of them. I don't think that this is going to be a scenario where people remember the FUD. I think that it's really going to come down to the fact that people will be buying all these different miners, and there's just going to be so much capital heading into that space that Bitfarms will be brought up regardless of whether or not there is fears of riot or anything else, or their underperformance on that front. And in fact, there may be more money going into Bitfarms at that point, because people will at some point figure out that they are undervalued. And if I've got to invest in 5 identical companies, and one of them is cheaper than the other ones for the same sort of stuff, why wouldn't I invest in the cheaper one? It's like you go to the grocery store and you're looking at sponges. If they're all pretty much the same, maybe you just buy the cheaper one at that point, right? Even if the cheaper sponge is maybe a little bit worse at the time. I don't know if this is the best analogy, but
I mean, it works, right? It makes sense. And I'm just picturing like dry SpongeBob, like the dry SpongeBob meme is like waiting for Bitfarms, right? That's the image that you conjured up in my head. But no, I totally agree with what you said, Tristan. I think that I agree that Bitfarms is underperforming, but they're not underperforming to the point where I'm actually like very concerned about them or anything like that. And as you said, I think that a lot of what's happened to Bitfarms is just like pure bad luck, right? Like I'm not trying to make excuses for them. I literally think it's just bad luck, right? So for example, they got a bad batch of the T21 miners, right? And I don't know if anyone else is heavily reliant on that series, but I've heard that series of miners from Bitmain, it tends to overheat, and that's just like an issue that nobody foresaw until they made tens of thousands of them and shipped them out to everyone, right? So it just so happens that Bitfarms is more reliant on that string of miners than everyone else, and then they also got a bad batch. So that's one. And then like nobody asked Riot to come in to try and buy the company for like pennies on the dollar, right? So that's kind of another thing that just happened. And I don't know exactly what happened with the CEO dispute, but in any case, that's been resolved, right? So the lawsuit that the old CEO launched against Bitfarms, that has been settled already. I don't know how much they paid him, but they just reported their earnings report. I don't see any like major issues on their balance sheet or anything. So, it's not like Bitfarms is going to go bankrupt or anything. The numbers, they look fine, and they could be better, obviously, right? But I don't see any major concerns from like the balance sheet perspective or from the growth is again lower than what I would like to be from the hash rate perspective, but again, there's a lot of bad news, bad luck that has caused bad news to happen, and I just think that going forward, past performance doesn't indicate future performance, right? So if you flip a coin 10 times, there is a chance that you get 10 heads in a row, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get 10 heads in a row next time you flip a coin 10 times, right? So Bitfarms has had bad luck, but I don't necessarily expect them to continue to suffer from bad luck unless they are, secretly doing something wrong that I don't know about. But things look fine, right? Like their reports, their operational updates have been, sort of B's and B minuses. Maybe if you were super tough on them, you can give them a C plus on a few of them. But I can't, like, if you were honest with yourself, I don't think that they have put out an operational report that's lower than a C plus, right? Like C plus would be a very harsh grade for the past few operational updates that they put out. And, I rated them B's and B minuses. If they just haven't had any A's, right? That's the unfortunate part. So I'm not too concerned yet. Maybe like let's wait a few months, I would say. I haven't sold any shares of my Bitfarms, by the way. So my plan is just kind of to continue to hold those shares, wait a few months. And again, like you said, Tristan, once the Bitcoin bull market really gets to its mania phase, and I would argue that it's not there yet, then you're going to see capital flow into Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining companies. And at that point, the sentiment might flip And it might not even matter if Bitfarms is not the most overwhelming, outstanding miner in the field. Like, it's the capital is going to flow in, and Bitfarms is going to be a beneficiary of that, right? But yeah, anyways, let me pass it off to the other guys if you want to add your opinions as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'll probably just quickly squeeze in here for a bit. I personally think it's funny how even Bitfarms doesn't fully believe in the Canadian government and they need government change in order to be able to pursue it more. I think it's just not them. It's like other people too. But anyway, that's my comment on the whole Bitfarms shenanigans. And I myself currently hold Bitfarms and Hive. I personally can't be bothered to buy Iron or Clean Spark as per example. I think I had Iron before, but I sold that. But I just don't want to pay the 1.5% conversion fee on Simple, and that's just me personally. And to what Andy said too as well, I think if capital is going to flow in the supposedly horoscope Bitcoin cycle in January coming, when like supposedly everything's going to be better for us. If Bitcoin's going to do very well, I'm sure Bitfarms will follow suit, even if it's not the top dog. I don't know if this is the right analogy per se, but let's just say like Bitfarms is, I don't know, like a Huawei phone or like a Google Pixel. It's not necessarily a Samsung like or an Apple, but it's still gonna give you some value in the end. It's that lower grade sponge, as Tristan was saying. It's not like necessarily the most expensive one, but I think in terms of the Bitcoin cycle, if everything projects well and properly, I'm sure we'll be fine buying Bitfarms. And to add to, it's a lot cheaper to buy. I think Iron's around like $10 as an example in USD. Can't be bothered. Like it's $2 to $3 to buy Bitfarms, and that's so much easier to digest. Although it hasn't been really moving, and I wish it was moving a bit more. It hasn't been moving in a long time. Hive's been moving a lot more. Just for reference, today's November 14th, Thursday. But we'll hope and see what happens in the coming days. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
Trying to learn it as I've been listening to you guys talk about it. Overall, I mean, I just think it's like it's a super complex business. I've done a little bit of home mining myself, and it's just like trying to figure out what machines to buy and how to make it profitable is pretty complex in general. And the one comment you wrote about how Bitfarms had to make a strategic decision to like move away from S21s to T21s just because of the premium on the price of them. Yeah, the Bitcoin industry is just really complex. And, the kinds of decisions you have to make and the capital expenditure involved in being a miner is complicated. And it's a leverage bet on Bitcoin, just like my MicroStrategy trade. It's really a measurement of like how much Bitcoin can these companies acquire per cycle. So I think that the current price action is just a reflection of the fact that we're not at that like mania stage yet, because you get to a situation where Bitcoin like 2x, 3x, 4x, the economics of a mining company post halving is all of a sudden the economics goes from being very poor post halving to very, very like good economics, because they're just printing digital money and their fiat expenses are relatively flat, so they just start printing Bitcoin at that point, and then their actual Bitcoin stockpile starts to spike, which is why mining companies at a later stage of the bull market are the ones that get the highest premium. So I would expect that the premium is going to come in soon for you guys. I don't think that the trade's going to go against you. And in terms of like the price action, my understanding is that a lot of it has to do with, there was another Bitcoin company, I can't remember its name, Mara Energy or something, that had a bad earnings report, which seems to have affected the entire industry in terms of sentiment. But that doesn't really mean much, because it seems like Bitfarms and CleanSpark just have better management. So I don't think it's gonna. I don't necessarily think that just because one company is having a bad earnings report, that's gonna reflect poorly on every company once the reports come out. And yeah, so I just think it's about timing. A lot of weird things happen in this market. Like I've seen days where I own a Bitcoin ETF that's like moving the opposite direction as the rest of the ETFs. I've seen days where MicroStrategy moves in opposite directions for the same odd reasons. Like these market makers make a lot of weird moves in the background, and it's kind of hard to know what they're doing sometimes. I would assume that a bunch of Bitcoin mining, and this is just my assumption, my speculation, is a bunch of Bitcoin mining stockholders started to buy like puts or something to like short-term puts to just in case they had a bad earnings report or something. They're just kind of hedging their bets for the corner, is my guess on what's happening. But you never know. It could be market manipulation beyond that. The comment you made about the politics is interesting just because Bitcoin is becoming a geopolitical issue now with the Trump administration potentially opening to become a Bitcoin reserve. So it's like disappointing that we have to wait for a political change in Canada for our political leaders to wake up to the issue, because I think it's a huge opportunity for an energy economy like Canada to get involved in this industry. It's also a very easy way for Canada to ramp up its own stack. Like we can use our energy companies or electricity companies. We can use our provincial governments can raise a lot of Bitcoin through the electricity companies, and nobody's even talking about it. We sell we like have all this excess electricity in places like Quebec and Ontario, and we actually have to pay like New York State to take it off our hands because we don't know where else where the energy to flow. So like it's very frustrating just watching Canadian like electricity infrastructure not pay attention to this issue.